Look at this picture of them cleaning up. Look at this.
That's a lot.
A lot of people, if you ask them how they want to die, just say, let me go to sleep and never wake up. That is, unless your cause of death while sleeping is spontaneous human combustion. Today on MKUSUAL. So let's talk about the concept of spontaneous human combustion. There is a historical definition. There's also more like modern forensics understandings of it. But there are 4 key characteristics. Number 1, complete or near complete cremation of the body. We are not just talking about people that got burnt up real bad. We're talking about a pile of ash.
Okay.
Number 2, there is preservation of some parts of the body, but it's like the extremities of the body. So it's the stuff that's farthest from the center, like your hands and your feet. Number 3, and this one to me is the creepiest. I used to not believe in this. I used to just think it was people falling asleep with like cigarettes in their mouth or whatever. There's always minimal damage to surrounding environments.
Yeah, that's creepy as fuck, dude.
If you're in a chair, you're in a wooden chair, a wooden rocking chair, it's just a pile of ash on the chair, some burn marks in like your hands and feet. But that chair, the amount of heat that it should have taken to get you does not get the chair for whatever reason.
A crematory flame typically reaches temperatures between 1400 to 1800 degrees Fahrenheit. This heat is necessary to break down the body tissues and bones efficiently.
That's so hot.
It's so hot.
If you've ever tried to burn bones, if you've ever made a fire pit out in the forest and tried to dispose of some bones for an innocent purpose, it's kind of hard. And then the 4th thing is that there's always, and I think this has to do with maybe some explanations, there's usually foul smelling residue, which you would expect.
Yeah.
Because it's, yeah. And sometimes they say it's greasy.
That makes sense.
Human fat.
Yeah. That's supposedly how we discovered soap.
Oh, no.
Pyres were next to like water sources, and the fat would just accumulate and go into the water. And
Pyres for animals?
well, sure. Oh, yeah. Well, it's also saying that a typical cremation lasts 1.5 to 3 hours at that temperature to completely reduce.
So it would have to be significantly hotter
To just
to do it quickly and to not cause.
Even if it was that hot, anything in a modern home would also combust.
Much less that, like, some of these are from like the 1800s. Like everything's carpeted. There's wallpaper.
Yeah.
There's like everything's made out of wood.
You're sitting on
A duvet.
yeah. I don't know. Yeah. Okay, go on.
So this kind of gets into like the paradox of spontaneous human combustion. So it's frequently reported enough, but it's officially unrecognized. And essentially the scientific community is reluctant to even accept this as a phenomenon, but it is a phenomenon. It is a thing that's happened.
Okay.
In history, we have pictures of the aftermath. So let's do some early documented cases. So this goes back to the 17th century where they had the first medical descriptions. Paul Rowley's account in the Philosophical Transactions of 1744. The case of a lady of quality. This comes from Lisa Smith at Wonders and Marvels. A strange case reported in a Gentleman's Magazine, 1731. The body of a lady of quality was found burned to ashes in her bedchamber. Possibly she had knocked over a lighted lamp during a fit, but this account does not seem particularly odd, but the brief report hinted at more interesting matters. A letter describing the death had been read before the Royal Society, and for years people speculated about how the woman's body burned with no apparent external cause. Here's more detail. The 62-year-old woman regularly applied spirit of camphor to prevent coughs and colds. After the fire, only the woman's shins, feet, 3 fingers, and a pile of ash remained. Although the bedroom was not burnt, it was covered in ashes that were clammy and stunk intolerably. A common fire can hardly reduce so large a body to ashes, the author argued.
Call her fat.
Pretty much. The author proposed the fire had been caused by a combination of spirit of camphor and fermentation of bodily juices. But this is a repeat occurrence. There was another case 10 years later In the article Philosophical Transactions, that's the Royal Society magazine, Reverend Joseph Bianchi and translator Paul Raleigh named the victim the Countess Cornelia Zingari. The Countess felt, quote, dull and heavy before bed, but spent 3 hours talking with her maid and praying. The maid later discovered the remains located 4 feet from their bed. The blankets and sheets on the bed were tossed aside as when a person rises up from it. Close observation was crucial in this account. Every detail had potential meaning. They dismissed the supernatural. Lightning flash was the most common opinion, and the spirit of camphor as causes. To support this analysis, Bianchi provided examples from medicine and chemistry. For example, since mixing 2 cold liquors together could produce flame, and the human body was a mixture of acid and oil, what wonder then if they may kindle? Bianchi concluded that the Countess's dullness came from, quote, too much heat concentrated in her breast, which prevented her from sweating normally. Her body was outside the bed because she needed to cool down. Her internal heat also explained the burn patterns with the fire starting in the torso. This makes me think of like Reiki.
Mm-hmm. Well, it made me think of a phenomenon in Buddhism called rainbow body, where advanced monks can they just evaporate. The body shrinks and disappears, and they appear as like a glowing light, or there's like light phenomenon in the surrounding area. Supposedly there's like 100,000 of these cases documented throughout history, the most recent being 1998.
Whoa, that's going to be a whole other show. Holy crap.
But that's like an intentional thing. They like spend their entire lives trying to meditate and, you know, freeing themselves from the attachment to the physical world, that it is an illusion, and they're like proving this by evaporating when they die. Anyway, made me think of that, but like unintentional. Also, the spirit of camphor it's just alcohol. So if something,
they're just rubbing alcohol in their Victorian fat asses.
Yeah, camphor is they call it a volatile aromatic compound, and alcohol, ethanol or isopropanol. The flash point is around 73 to 100 degrees. So if there were like a lightning event, it would easily ignite. Plus, she probably had a bottle of it around. But that's still
Why wouldn't the bed?
Why wouldn't you move if she was on fire? You're not just gonna be like, "Oh my God, I'm on fire."
You would think. Okay,
you wouldn't just lay there.
We had a family friend
if you caught fire.
Well, that the Countess did get up. She threw her sheets off.
Okay,
but that still doesn't, dude. You think there'd be burns on everything? Like, we had a family friend whose husband caught fire at work. I know.
That sucks.
Yeah, it's a horrific story. This dude, while on fire, not only stopped, dropped, rolled, ran around this place. Sometimes people will catch other people and other things on fire.
Yeah.
Had so much adrenaline that he grabbed a fire extinguisher and ripped the handle off. This is a true...
Okay.
So therefore, he couldn't be... fire extinguisher no longer works. But... It's a horrific. I'm only laughing.
It's like absurd. There's an absurdity to that. That's like,
I know,
that is unfortunately.
But
funny.
You wouldn't just find this like perfect Victorian room with no burns on the bed sheets and this person just neatly burnt on the floor with her feet, her toes. Charles Dickens made a reference in Bleak House, 1852. There were early scientific investigations and dismissals in the 1800s. And the huge fascination with this in the Victorian era. I like associate this with the Victorian era for some reason. But that's not, apparently that's not it. I always just pictured like an old timey room by a fireplace with a library and just, here. So we've already done the Countess in 1731. Here are some much more recent ones. Mary Reeser, 1951. Detailed forensic analysis in this case. The FBI got involved, and this is when the Wick effect theory was first applied in this century. She was a St. Petersburg, Florida woman whose fiery death was surrounded by mystery. This is so scary, dude. Don't let me burn up. Don't let it happen.
There's almost nothing I can do about it. So
can you stand over me at night with a bucket of water? We can take shit. We could take shifts cleaning. Look at this picture of them cleaning up. Look at this.
That's a lot to process.
It's just a pile.
That seems like a lot for one person.
Yeah.
Okay.
When interviewed by a local paper, Reese's daughter-in-law said perhaps it was a cigarette that dropped in her lap and that fat fuel kept her burning. The chair was by itself, however. Apparently, in this case, there was very little around her to burn, and her floor was concrete. The FBI declared that Reeser had been incinerated by the wick effect. As she was a known user of sleeping pills, they hypothesized that she had fallen unconscious while smoking, set herself afire in her night clothes. Once the body starts to burn, the FBI wrote, there's enough fat and other inflammable substances to permit varying amounts of destruction to take place. Sometimes this destruction by burning will proceed to a degree which results in almost complete combustion of the body. This is from a letter. We request any information or theories that could explain how a human body could be so destroyed and the fire confined to such a small area and so little damage done to the structure of the building and the furniture in the room, not even scorched or damaged by smoke. See, that's the scariest thing to me, is that there's no smoke damage.
Okay, when I've cooked for a long time. I've burnt a lot of shit. I've left oil in a pan and some onions I was sauteing. It's black smoke.
Yeah.
Okay. But if the clothes would leave some, I don't know. I guess it depends on the type of clothes she was wearing.
So let's do John Irving Bentley.
This is also making me think of the gin and the smokeless fire.
You sent me a video about the gin the other day.
Yeah.
I had all these smokeless fire dreams.
That was a spooky one.
That was a spooky one. So let's do John Irving Bentley, moving up to the present day. This is 1966. He was a physician who burned to death at the age of 92 in his bathroom in Pennsylvania. Last seen alive, the 4th of December, 1966, when friends visiting the home wished him a good night around 9 p.m. The following morning, meter reader Don Gosnell let himself into Bentley's house, as he had permission to do due to Bentley's infirmity, went to the basement to check the meter. While in the basement, Gosnell noticed a strange smell and a light blue smoke. He explained the smoke to be somewhat sweet, like a new oil burning central heating system. On the ground was a neat pile of ash about 14 inches in height. The floor underneath the ash was unmarked. Had he looked up, he would have seen a hole around a foot-long square in the floorboards above. The bedroom was smoky, and in the bathroom he found Bentley's cremated remains. All that was left with Bentley was the lower half of his right leg and the slipper still on it. Rest of the body reduced to a pile of ashes in the basement below. Oh my God. His walker lay across the hole in the floor generated by the fire. He fell through the floor. The rubber tips in it still intact, and the nearby bathtub was barely scorched. Gosnell ran from the building to get help. He reached the gas company office screaming, Dotler Bentley's burned up, to his colleagues.
This is a phenomenon that's it is so, in my mind, so plausible for a completely rational explanation or one that isn't rational at all. One that doesn't, that's almost supernatural or a phenomenon we don't understand. Their chakra generated so much energy because they were harboring strong feelings or something, I don't know. Something like that. Or
did I already ask if
the wick effect is pretty acceptable too?
Can Kundalini set you on fire?
I don't know. It's a good question. I mean, this is it's if you, I keep going back to the rainbow body thing because it's that's a loving, accepting, intentional thing. But I don't know, what would the opposite of that be? It kind of feels I don't know. I'm definitely a believer in Reiki. I had a friend who studied it and did some stuff. She woo-wooed, and I felt better.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Watch out, bro. This one scares me.
She also said like the high level practitioners of Reiki can do it from anywhere.
Oh,
Like you can
I
call
can call you and be like, Reiki me?
yeah, and I'll be like wah, 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 wah.
That's wild. This one's freaky. This comes from Mental Floss. Robert Francis Bailey. This is from 1967, London. A group of London office workers was waiting for the bus around 5 a.m., September 13th, 1967. They noticed flames in the upper window of a building. Immediately called police, rushed to the scene of the derelict building. There they found the still burning body of Robert Bailey, an unhoused man. The police officer first to the scene reported that a blue flame was seen emitting forcefully from a 4-inch slit in Bailey's abdomen. He had like a stove flame coming out of his stomach, and his teeth were clenched down on the newel post of the staircase he had collapsed next to. Sounds very painful. They managed to extinguish Bailey by forcing a hose into the abdominal cavity. He was a non-smoker. He did abuse alcohol, however. Some of these cases do deal with that. He drank denatured alcohol. I don't know what that means because it was cheap. Denatured alcohol is the stuff without any beverage properties. Oh, like
Everclear.
or like rubbing alcohol. What? There was no source of the ignition though, and it was coming from inside of him. Could you like swallow a match? In paranormal lore, blue flames are often associated with various supernatural phenomenon, ghosts, fairies, the presence of specific entities or magical energies.
I looked up what all the chakras have a color associated with them. The throat chakra is the blue. The element associated with it is ether. It's located in the throat or neck region. Blocked state, shyness, difficulty expressing thoughts, dishonesty, or fear of speaking up. And I was just thinking of like repressed things that would.
Some of the one of the most the last one we're gonna do is a modern case, but I'm gonna throw out some of the hypothesis. Wick effect, just the idea that you're a big fatty candle. The ketosis hypothesis, diabetes and alcoholism as potential factors. Acetone production in the human body. However, this biochemistry can't fully explain the spontaneous human combustion. There's static electricity buildup, which that was one of the first things they thought back in the 1800s. Geomagnetic phenomenon, quantum biological explanations. You know what? This could be something quantum. It could be like a little mini nuke going off inside you or something. The lack of smoke damage or smoke seeping into things around them in a couple of these cases.
Because like you see what happens to a candle, the wax like runs down. You would think that like for all the fat to be burned, or for this to happen where it doesn't go all the way to completion, so to speak, and there would be like some fat left. Biologists kind of deny the quantum world. They kind of like are late to coming around to that party.
Right. Although I mean, more and more, I remember a few years ago I read some biology thing that was saying that the what do they call it when plants make energy out of sunlight?
Photosynthesis.
Yeah, that's quantum apparently, or has like a big quantum element.
Okay. Yeah, it's like
You're right though; they're late to the party, kind of.
yeah. Okay.
So there is a 2011 case of an Irishman who the coroner, and this might be the first time this ever happened, the coroner pronounced the cause of death as spontaneous human combustion. It's the first official coroner's ruling of SHC.
Okay.
And this is the first time that modern forensics, like truly modern forensics, have been used. The death of Michael Faherty, this comes from NBC News, 76-year-old Irishman who burned to death in his home in December of 2010. Scorch marks above and below the body, but no evidence of any gasoline, kerosene, or other accelerant. Coroner Sierra McLaughlin reported, the fire was thoroughly investigated, and I'm left with the conclusion that this fits into the category of spontaneous human combustion, for which there's no adequate explanation. Usually, fires do not start on their own. Genius, NBC News. When investigators are searching for the cause of forest fires, they don't assume that the flame ignited itself, but instead, probably caused by a careless camper, lightning strike. Though rare, spontaneous human combustion has long been known to occur under the right circumstances. Many things can self-ignite on a hot day, including used rags containing oil or gasoline and piles of compost. Coal dust can also spontaneously ignite. Several spontaneous human combustion victims were last seen drinking alcohol and smoking. I don't care because my problem with this isn't that, okay, you could completely fall asleep, dump vodka on yourself, cigarette lights the vodka on fire, your clothes catch on fire, there is a wick effect. I'm trying to figure out why it burns you so hot and so quickly. There are lots of people who have been caught on fire who do survive, albeit for a small amount of time, or they end up in the hospital with like horrible skin grafts and stuff. Like, people don't just burn up like a freaking paper towel.
The spontaneous human combustion, the phenomenon of it must happen so quickly that they die quickly, so their body doesn't move, and then the wick effect takes over.
Yeah.
It doesn't. I don't know. I don't have like enough of an understanding to like. I just don't feel certain about. I don't feel certain about one thing or the other.
Yeah.
To me, this is still a mystery.
This is one of the things that I was like irrationally scared of, or maybe rationally, when I was a kid. Like, when you hear about this, you're like, I could just catch fire for no reason.
Yeah.
I mean, it could be, okay, the guy who was drinking unnatured alcohol, okay, adding fuel to the fire. I'm sure that had something to do with it.
That's an accelerant,
yes,
as it's called.
But you're also a big, wet, meaty, what causes a fire inside of your stomach? Like, what? Because an accelerant just makes the fire worse, right? So, like,
yeah,
there has to be something going on inside our bodies. All right. Well, final thoughts, I guess.
I don't know. No final thoughts, I guess.
I wish I had computer graphics so I could make us just explode right there.
Right.